Hello, welcome to my March of the Machine set review preview thing, where I go over the cards for limited, specifically draft is sort of the format I like to focus on. Keep in mind this is a perspective from the perspective of somebody who doesn't claim to know what they're doing. Especially, it's sort of a project I do just kind of for fun. I like watching them, so figure I'd make some. Hopefully to help me get better at evaluating cards and maybe help you as well. And without further ado, let's get into it. We're going to start with white. You can see the lovely Monastery Mentor on the right there is one of the cards being reprinted. Is a card being reprinted in this set. It is a very powerful card. In case you don't know how I grade cards, I'm going to turn off my camera quickly just so you can see what's going on there. But these are sort of my ways of ranking the cards. Yeah, this is sort of, there's 5 tiers. I've actually changed. I used to do 4, but now I do 5 because I felt like 4 wasn't enough to like properly evaluate cards and stuff. Like I just didn't feel like I was had enough places to put them. So now I've gone up to 5. We'll see if I like it more or not. See if I actually use the 5th tier or I've just put everything in tier 3 now. Who knows? I've been known to do that. So let's get into it. I'm going to turn my camera back on and move on. So the first card, going in alphabetical order, is Aerial Boost. It is 1 and a white for an instant with Convoke. Convoke basically means that your creatures can pay for the spell. You can tap them to pay for the spell, and they can actually tap for mana of their color, as well as just colorless mana. So this spell can cost 0 mana. It's an instant, but usually it costs 2, and target creature gets +2/+2 and gains flying until end of turn. So the first time I saw this card, I was like, I'll just put it in like tier 4. It's kind of like a below average combat trick. And then I was like, no, it's actually like going to do quite a bit because flying is good in limited. We know this. This is like one of the central tenets of limited. And then I was just like, wait a minute. This card is just doing everything. It's basically free. It's kind of like a free combat trick, like, especially on defense. Like on defense, this thing is actually free because your stuff didn't attack. Yeah, I don't know. The more I thought about this card, the more I like really liked this card. It plays well with like any Convoke spell plays exceptionally well with Vigilance. This is one that plays really well with Vigilance, and it allows you to attack your opponent's battles. If you don't know about battles, we'll get into battles, but they are not always the easiest things to attack. We learned the last set that attacking is not always as easy as you think it might be. And yeah, that's why I think this card's really good. I think this is just a really strong card. I know it doesn't draw anything, but it just, the efficiency is important. Next, Alabaster Host Intercessor. 5 and a white for a 3/4. When it enters the battlefield, exile target creature an opponent controls until it leaves the battlefield. And you can cycle it for planes. Basically, you can pay 2 and cycle it and get a planes. This effect is always really good. This type of thing where you're basically banish or priesting your opponent's creature. You're getting rid of it until the creature leaves. This one is especially hard to remove because it's has 4 toughness. It is 6 mana, so that is the downside. It's why it's not tier 1. It is a 6 mana card, but you're still getting a lot of value for 6 mana. You can cycle it too. You also have the ability to cycle it, which is great utility. Yeah, there's a cycle of cyclers. I guess there's a common cycle in each color, and this is the white one, and I like it quite a bit. Next, Alabaster Host Sanctifier, 1 and a white for a 2/2 with lifelink. Just kind of a standard card that is unassuming and is always good. So I don't see any reason why this card is not going to be good. Maybe tier 2 is a little high. Maybe it's going to end up in the tier 3 average card. But I mean, there's a lot of +1/+1 counter stuff going on, and I just think this card's going to really perform well in a format where that's the case. Next, Angelic Intervention. It's a 1 and a white for an instant. Target creature or planeswalker you control gains protection from the color or colorless of your choice until end of turn. If it's a creature, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Yeah, I mean, this type of card is fine. It's not usually as good as, people say, protection. It's better than hexproof and whatever because you can make stuff like unblockable, but that doesn't really come up. Like the +1/+1 counter is nice, but I mean, 2 mana. Like when you compare this to a card like a Snakeskin Veil, 2 mana being is just so much more than one when you're holding up that mana. Now counters are probably better in this set than Kaldheim, but either way, I just think this card is a little finicky, and you kind of need your opponent to act first in order for it to be good. So that's part of it too. And overall, I just think it's kind of a below average card. Next, Archangel Elspeth, 2 white for a 4 loyalty planeswalker. +1, you can create a soldier with lifelink, a 1/1. A -2, you put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature, becomes an angel in addition to its other types and gains flying. And -6, you return all non-land permanent cards with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this card's great. I didn't put it in tier 1 as like a best of the best card because it doesn't have any removal, and there is going to be a lot of tools in this set to be interacting with cards like Planeswalkers because of battles. Like battles are sort of similar to Planeswalkers in a lot of ways. So sort of like my viewpoint on that was it makes Planeswalkers worse when there are more cards that can interact with battles, basically. Like when there's other ways to interact, which there have to be, right? Or battles are just like too good. It makes Planeswalkers worse. Now this card's still great. Like it's still like maybe it's tier 1, maybe it's tier 2. Either way, you're gonna first pick it and be fine and happy and whatever. Like the semantics between tier 1 and 2 are kind of minimal, but yeah. Next, Attentive Sky Warden, 2 and a white for a 2/2 with flying. It deals combat damage to a player. You can transform up to one target incubator token you control. We'll get into what these are a little bit later. But essentially, there are these tokens you make that are artifacts, and you can pay 2 to transform them, and they get a number of +1/+1 counters on them, and they transform into a creature with that many counters on it. And this card's very deck dependent. Actually, the more I looked at the set, the more I was kind of on this card. It's sort of like green, like white black is kind of the only deck that wants this, but I don't have a lot of faith that deck's actually going to be very good. Green black is more of a counters deck, even though green black also does some incubate stuff. You'll see incubate kind of all over the place. But yeah, I think this card is fine. Like you can play it, but it's nothing special. Next, Bola Slinger, 3 and a white for 2/2 backup 1. And so backup is when this creature enters the battlefield, put +1/+1 counter on target creature. If it's a creature that is not this one, it gains the following ability until end of turn. Now, actually, that text actually changes because if a creature has multiple abilities, which we'll get into, whenever this creature attacks, you tap target artifact or creature an opponent controls. So it's an attack-based tapper. Those are often very bad. Wizards figured out the thing that I figured out, I think, by looking at these cards and just saying, hey, like anything with backup on it is just going to be absolutely insane because it's a lot of tempo, and +1/+1 counters are so good in this format, and like you're also giving abilities with the +1/+1 counters, so like you're making them even better. So they really dialed this one back. It's really like a 4-mana 3/3. Like 4-mana 3, like this card is like just totally unplayable by itself. You know what I mean? Like you play this on 4 and you don't have a board, it is just completely embarrassing and it's just unplayably bad. So that's kind of it with this card, and that's kind of how you have to evaluate it because you're not always going to have 2-drop, 3-drop, and then play this and then roll your opponent. But sometimes you will, and it'll be great when that happens. Next, and this is kind of the card that I was talking about, Boombringer Valkyrie is a 3 white for a 4/4 flying for a strike and lifelink. It has backup as well. This one gives all of its abilities with backup. So when it's backup, it's every ability. The text, the Oracle text reads differently on different cards, which is, I'm not super thrilled about it. I guess it's just like an English language thing. I don't know. It was a design choice. Either way, could be confusing to some people. I was confused. But yeah, this card is actually just nuts. Like I think it's probably the best card in the set. I would be I don't know who I think best card in the set. It's definitely going to be like a top 5 card. Like it just is really insane. Like you just get to play a 5-mana 4/4 with all these abilities, and then one of your other creatures becomes this creature, but like with haste, and then it just attacks, and it just is like really strong, and it gets to just do whatever it wants, and you never lose. So it's just really, really strong. Next card, Cut Short. 2 mana white for an instant with Convoke. You destroy target planeswalker that was activated this turn or tapped creature. This is kind of what I'm talking about with some of that incidental planeswalker removal type deals, where like normally you wouldn't see this. Again, Convoke is really like Convoke plays really interestingly with a lot of these things. Like it's like with Convoke, you can kind of have this like sort of control deck where you're defensive, you have these defensive creatures, and when your opponent actually does get a big creature to attack you, you can be like, I'll just like free cut short it. Now that's kind of a dream. That's not like, actually going to happen very often, but yeah, the instant speed on this is nice. It does work that way, and it does work on just tapped creatures. The creature does not have to be attacking. Now, obviously, it doesn't really kill vigilance stuff. So there's pluses and minuses to this card, but I think the Convoke actually makes it kind of decent. Next, Dusk Legion Duelist, 2 mana, 1 and a white for a 2/2 vigilance. Whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on this creature, draw a card. This only triggers once each turn. But it's like fantastic, like getting a free draw card off of all your backups, and this thing already has vigilance on it. That's really strong. I don't think it's quite tier 1 because again it doesn't quite take over the game and be like a top 20 card or so of the set, but either way, it's good. It's a solid card. You really are going to want premium 2-drops. Like 2-drops are going to be at a premium again in this set, so this being a good 2-drop is certainly very good as well. Next, Elspeth Smite. Single white mana. For an instant, it deals 3 damage to target attacker and blocking creature and exiles that creature if it would die this turn. So this type of effect I'm usually not a big fan of, but the raw efficiency of this card is very high. And so as a result, I have to respect it. And that's just true. You just have to be respecting the efficiency of the card. I could get proven wrong, and I could still be bad, because usually these effects are indeed bad, but if it's not this time and it's actually good, I'll feel good that I was able to identify that. I have no preconceived notions about whether or not I'm going to actually be right at all, but you know, it'd be cool. It'd be cool if that were the case. And yeah, that's kind of all I got to say about that. So there's this next card is called Enduring Bond, when it's single white for backup 1. When this creature dies, put its counters on target creature you control. So there's kind of a cycle of these, like 1 mana 0/1s, or like there's a bunch of just 0/1s in the set, which is weird because you don't really see the stat line very often. I don't know. This card doesn't seem good to me. Like if you play it on turn 1, just kind of when you want to play 1-drops, like when they are at their best, it's not good because a 1 mana 1/2 that gives it its counters to something when it dies is just not that good of a card. Now in this set, it might be a little better, so maybe this ends up being like a tier 3 card, like an average card. I just can't imagine it being that strong. I'm going to start with it low. Like if backup is as good as this card is kind of like claiming that it is, this card isn't like saying anything, but what it kind of is saying to me is like, okay, this card, like backup, you got to watch out because this text is like insane on these cards. So I don't know. That's kind of my viewpoint on it. Next, Golden Scale Aeronaut. 4 and a white for a 2/3 backup 1 flyer. So obviously this gives something flying when it ETBs, and it gives something a +1/+1 counter. So it's solid. It's kind of like the soldier guy from Brothers War, which gave a +1/+1 counter to soldiers. I don't think this is as good as that card, obviously, because in the right deck. I think the card was very deck dependent. But this card, you know, it does still get the +1/+1 counter, and it gives flying for a turn, which is very strong. So you kind of balance those things out. Probably still a pretty good card, but not anything amazing. Just kind of a solid, limited card. Next, Guardian of Jurafur. I don't think I pronounced that correctly at all. 2 and a white for a 3/3 flyer, and when it enters the battlefield, exile up to 1 target creature or artifact you control. You return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So basically, you get to flicker something when the CTBs. Obviously, not quite as good as Restoration Angel because it is not It doesn't have flash, so it can't save your stuff, but still can get value on the cards like the card we just saw with the O1 and the other stuff with backup and everything. And this card's just going to play really well in the set. And even if it literally just was a 3-mana 3/3 flyer, it would be a tier 1 card because it's just so efficient. And this card is going to be really, really good. Next, 4 and a white for a 4/3 Infected Defector. Very fun, nice card to say the name of. Hard to argue with that sentiment. When it dies, you incubate 3. We all know that on dies is just kind of bad compared to enters the battlefield or some other triggers. A lot of times you don't want your stuff to die, and this, like a 4/3 that dies into a 2-mana 3/3 is just not, it's not super enticing to me, to be honest with you. You don't want to like sacrifice this to anything because it's 5 mana, so it's just kind of sitting on the battlefield. It doesn't block especially well, so it probably could trade down for like your opponent's 3-drop, and that's not even good. So I'm not really out on this card. Inspired Charge is a reprint, 2 white for an instant. Creatures you control get +2/+1 until end of turn. I don't really know why they reprinted this, to be honest with you. I just don't see that there would be like, there's no go wide deck. There's no deck that's like, oh, I'm going wide, and then my whole purpose is to finish the game with an Inspired Charge. That doesn't really exist. So it just kind of feels like a weird place to put this, but yeah, it's not really. It's a very situational card, probably not very good. You can play it in aggro decks if you want, but you probably still would prefer not to. Next, Kithkin Billy Rider, 2 and a white for a double striker. It's a 1/3. So a 3-mana double striker. There's a ton of backup +1/+1 counters like all around over the place in the format. This wears those counters especially well. All you really need is like 1 counter, and it's just really good, right? You just put 1 counter on this, and you're like, yep, I did it. I got there. And I think you're going to be getting there that's going to happen every single game. Like if you're playing a white deck, you're going to have the ability to put a +1/+1 counter on this like every single game if you want to, and your opponent doesn't remove it. So yeah, and the knight text also matters. Blue-white knights is an archetype, so that is also relevant. Next, speaking of knights, Knight of the New Coalition, 3 and a white for a 2/2 vigilance. When it enters the battlefield, you create a 2/2 with vigilance, which is very good because you're just getting a 4-mana 4/4 vigilance, kind of, right? You're getting 2/2s for vigilance for 4, which is not quite the same as a 4/4 vigilance, but in the Knights deck, actually it kind of is because the blue-white gold card is a Lord, so you're actually getting like kind of better value. It just is just really nice. You just get a lot of game objects, and for 4 mana, you're getting good value. So I think this card is really strong. Next, Knight Errant of Eos. 4 and a white for a 4/4 with Convoke is a knight as well. When it enters the battlefield, you look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal up to 2 creature cards with mana value X or less from among them, where X is the number of creatures that convoked this card, and you put the revealed cards into your hand and shuffle. So I originally had this card a little bit lower, but I've sort of talked myself up on it because I just think that you're going to draw a card with this so often that it's just going to be really strong, and you're probably going to be able to convoke it, and you can even be like, oh, I'll just like on turn like 5 or something. You could play this for 3 mana and then play a 2-drop. Like you could even, I think, the next time I see a Convoke card, I'll read this text. I believe you can tap the creature when it enters, like if it has summoning sickness. It's possible that that's wrong. That's very possible that's wrong. I have not played like officially with Convoke. I have played with Convoke cards, but not like officially yet. So it's if you can do that, this card's even better. If you can't, it's still good. So that's kind of my view on it. Next, Core Halberd. Single white mana for an equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has vigilance, and it is a equip for 1. This card's very good. So Short Sword by itself is decent because it just as like 1 mana, equip 1 +1/+1 is sort of fine. It's like a fine Magic card, and so yeah, that's fine. And then giving the vigilance is great. It's just fantastic. So I think this is actually just a really strong equipment, and so that's tough. That's just a tough place to be if you're other equipment and you're not this equipment, because this is like the first common equipment we've had in a while where I'm like actually excited to play it. I'm like, oh, it's actually going to be good. It's going to be good, and they just don't print it very often. So next, the aforementioned Monastery Mentor, 2 and a white for a 2/2 with prowess. When you cast a non-creature spell, create a 1/1 with prowess. And yeah, this card's insane. So basically, you just build your own prowess army, and then you cast any prowess spell and just kill your opponent. This card's just gas. Like, it's probably not going to be as good and limited as you see it be in like Vintage Cube, but it doesn't matter because it's just insane. So this card's just ridiculous. Upshifted from Uncommon, one of the best uncommons ever printed. So be advised on that one. Next, Norn's Inquisitor. 1 and a white for a 1/1. When it enters the battlefield, incubate 2. And whenever a permanent you control transforms into a Phyrexian, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So basically you can make a 3 mana 3/3 if you want, or like a 2 mana 3/3 next turn. Or on what most likely is going to happen is you're going to, on turn 4, make it 3/3 and also do something else for 2 mana if this thing sticks around. And it can also, it also does your other incubate stuff. This also technically works with battles, although not really going to come up very often, but it can happen. It's sort of fine. It is. There's a lot of cards in this set that are 2-drops that also give you something to do on turn 3, which actually are really nice because 3 is kind of an awkward amount of mana sometimes, where you don't want to have too many 3-drops, but I definitely want to have tons of 2-drops. So that's another sort of theme to think about with this set. Next, Phyrexian Awakening, 2 and a white for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, incubate 4, and Phyrexians you control have vigilance. So you can kind of read this as like a 5-mana 4/4 vigilance that also gives all your Phyrexians vigilance. There are a lot of Phyrexians in white. There's a decent number of them in the set. All the tokens, the incubate tokens are Phyrexians, obviously. The installment plan, as many people call it, this type of paying in increments instead of all at once is usually very good. When I first saw this card, I was like, oh, it's terrible. Blah, blah. And then I was like, okay, let's be reasonable. This card's actually fine. It's good. It's probably might even be tier 2, to be honest with you, the more I look at it. I know on turn 3 you're kind of taking the turn off, but on turn 4 you're getting a 2-mana 4/4. It's pretty good. That's not bad. And it has vigilance, so and it actually has haste too. When you think about it, because you create the token on turn 3, so when you transform it, it doesn't leave the battlefield, so it can still attack, which is great. So this card is just really strong. And another reason that you want to have stuff to do that costs 2 mana in your deck. So be advised. Very important to have stuff that costs 2 mana in your deck. Next, Phyrexian Censor, 2 and a white for a 3/3. Each player can't cast more than 1 non-Phyrexian each turn. Non-Phyrexians enter the battlefield tapped. I did not realize that this is both double-sided. I don't think that matters because it's still way better for you than it is for your opponent because you have the 3/3 on the battlefield. So, and your opponent is much less likely to be playing Phyrexians than you are. So you're probably there are situations where you could hose them. You could basically get them, but it's going to be not as good as I thought. So maybe this is actually tier 3. I'm happy to leave it in tier 2. I think it's still an above average card. Next, Progenitor Exarch, XX and a white for a 1/2. When it enters the battlefield, incubate 3 X times. And you can tap it and transform target incubator token you control. So this card's very strange. You never want to play this for 1, right? It's just not good. It's just not, you don't want to do that. The question is, do you want to play it for 3 or 5? Do you want to wait till 5? You probably would prefer to wait till 5 because it's much easier to have other 3-drops in your deck. I don't know. There's a lot of moving parts with this card. It might end up being really insane. But I don't know. My expectations I'm kind of tempering them, being just put it in tier 2. It's going to be a solid card. It's definitely going to be good. Is it going to be insane? Maybe, maybe not. Kind of got to play with it. But it just is the mana plus time requirements kind of make me feel weird about it and its efficacy. So that's my view on it. Next, Realmbreaker's Grasp. 1 and a white for an enchantment. Enchant artifact or creature. Enchanted permanent can't attack or block. Its artifact activated abilities can't be activated unless they're mana abilities. So we just basically saw this in 1. It was very good. It's going to be good again. Maybe it'll be slightly worse because there's battles. Actually, I think that'll make it slightly better because there's more things you want to attack. I don't know. Cards to being 2 mana as opposed to 3 is very important. So, yeah. Next, Scroll Shift. 2 and a white for an instant. Exile up to 1 target artifact, creature, or enchantment you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. You draw a card. No, this card is not very good. It even though it draws you a card, and like I'm sure there's a deck where it's like, oh, I did the thing, and this card's actually playable. But generally, like this is a card that I'm going to lose to and be mad because my opponent's playing it. Situation. That's kind of what's going to happen with this card. That's the situation we're in here. Is that I'm just going to be upset. So that's why the card exists. The card exists to frustrate me, and for no other reason. Next, Seal from Existence. 1 white for an enchantment with Ward 3. It enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent and opponent controls until it leaves the battlefield. So yeah, this is just a really strong Oblivion Ring. It would be tier 1 if it were not for the fact that it is 1 white instead of 2 and a white. If it were 2 and a white, I would put it in tier 1. The casting cost is going to hurt it. Because it makes it a lot slower. It makes it less likely you can cast it when you want to. So it does matter. Like don't sleep on that. But it is still a very strong card. Next, Sigiled Sentinel. 2 and a white for 2/2 backup 1 vigilance. This is sort of your role player card. This card goes in every white deck. It does backup 1. It has vigilance. It's a knight. It really just kind of fits everywhere, and you're always going to want it. It's probably not going to be a super, super high pick, but you're never going to cut this card. It's always going to be in your deck, I think. I can't imagine a deck I'm ever cutting this. So, yeah, that's the take. Next, Sunder the Gateway. 1 and a white for sorcery. Choose 1. You can destroy target non-token artifact or enchantment your opponent controls, and you incubate 2. Or you incubate 2 and then transform an incubator token you control. So basically, this is a 2-mana 2/2, or that can also have an alternate mode of destroy an artifact or enchantment and then make a 2/2 that I can pay 2 for later. So this is definitely a card you want to main deck, I think, because there are a decent number of artifacts and enchantments running around. It does only hit non-tokens, which is kind of unfortunate because if you hit the other incubator tokens, that would be really, really good, but it does only hit non-tokens. But the worst case scenario is you're buying out on a 2/2, which is strong. It's just strong to have situational cards in your deck because when they're good, they're very good. And when they're bad, they're still playable and you're not losing the game. Now, I don't think you really want to play this on 2 all that often. I just don't think that's something you even want to do if you don't have a 2-drop, but it's possible that you do. It's possible that's correct. And just have the option is nice. Next, Sunfall. This is another card contender for best card in the set. 3 white for a sorcery. Exile all creatures. Incubate X, where X is the number of creatures exiled this way. Yeah, I mean, this is just a Wrath that allows you to also play into your board. You can play a 2-drop and a 3-drop and be like, well, maybe I want a Wrath, maybe I don't. And you can sort of lay off for 1 turn and be like, yeah, I've decided to I wanted to Wrath. My opponent played a bomb. Okay, I'll just Wrath, and then I get a bigger guy because I played my other cards out. It's just insane. This card's just ridiculous. I don't it exiles. I don't know. It's so absurd. The more that you look at this card, the more absurd it becomes. I guess is kind of my view on it. Really, it's one of the better Wraths ever printed. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. That's my view on it. It's just insane. Next, Surge of Salvation. Single white mana for an instant. You and permanents you control gain hexproof until end of turn. Prevent all source black or red damage sources that deal damage to the creatures of the turn. So there's a cycle of these cards that are color hosers. which is I kind of like because I just like mechanics that are bad, basically. Why? Because I don't know. My brain, that's just how I am. I like bad mechanics, and as a result, I love color hosing because it is bad, and I don't have to suffer the consequences of it in like standard or whatever. Like I only play limited, so I just don't care. But yeah, usually generally not worth it to play these type of cards. Again, only hexproof is just not. It's not it. It's just not it. Next, Swordsworn Cavaliers, 1 and a white for a 3/1. It has first strike as long as another knight entered the battlefield this turn under your control. Yeah, I mean, this card, very good aggressive 2-drop. It's a knight. It wears +1/+1 counters very well. So it just kind of does a lot of things and just gets in early. So I like it a lot. Next, Tiller of Flesh, 3 and a white for a 2/4. It's a knight. When you cast a spell that targets one or more permanents, incubate 2. So this is a value card, obviously. But like you're not especially happy to be playing this card if you only get 1 incubate out of it. So you kind of need to get 2. But how are you getting 2? You have to target 2 creatures, and this doesn't like it probably is going to live for a little while. I don't know. I'm sort of the opinion this card's a little slow and mediocre. It could prove me wrong. It very well could prove me wrong. I'm kind of skeptical for now. We'll see how good the incubate tokens end up actually being. Next, Zolfrin Lancer. 2 and a white for a 3/3. Whenever another knight enters the battlefield under your control, it gets +1/+1 and gains vigilance until the turn. Just a really strong card. A really good reason to be playing knights in your deck. All of white's like best commons are knights. Notably, this does not get capped at once per turn. So if you play 2 knights, it gets +2/+2. So be advised about that. It's just a good card. So yeah. Yeah, even without knights, it's like fine. It's like a 3-mana 3/3, which isn't like the worst thing on planet Earth. All right, we've reached our first battle. Invasion of Belenon, 2 and a white for a battle. So how battles work is when it enters the battlefield, you choose, or these type of battles, I guess, you choose an opponent to protect it, and then they basically get it on their side of the battlefield, although you own it still. It's still your permanent, but you can attack it, and they're defending it, like with their creatures, similar to how you can defend planeswalkers. And so then when this battle enters, and then when it dies, it transforms back on your side of the battlefield as the thing on the bottom there, which in this case is the Belenon War Anthem. So when this one enters the battlefield, you create a +2 white and blue knight token of vigilance. So, and the anthem obviously is an anthem. Okay, +1/+1. So, I have gone sort of through the roller coaster of emotions with battles at this current juncture of my life. When I first looked at all the battles, I was very underwhelmed. I was sort of like, I don't really like these. I've heard some people compare them to the Kamigawa sagas. I do not. When I first looked at the Kamigawa sagas, I thought they were busted. When I first looked at the battles, I'm like, that's a lot of work to kind of put in to flip these. So I'm kind of starting a little pessimistic on them. But they are. Then I was like, but they're a new mechanic, so they must have gotten it right. They must be strong and like decent, because otherwise, what's the point of introducing a new card type if you're not going to make it good? But yeah, so that's kind of the conundrum that we've reached here, where I just don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody knows how good battles are. So we'll see how they play, see how they feel. And there's definitely a cost to flipping them. Don't think it's free to flip them. The Kamigawa ones were free. These are not free. Next, Invasion of Dominaria, 2 and a white for a 5 loyalty. I guess it's a 5 protection counters battle. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 4 life and draw a card, and it flips into a 4 forward flying and vigilance. So this is an example of one of the battles that incentivizes you to play a longer game, and because you're playing a longer game, you're probably going to be better at flipping it. I don't know. Like, the front side of it is, like, you wouldn't play Revitalize in your deck, so would you play Revitalize that also gains your opponent 6 life, but you do get a 4/4 Flying Vigilance for 3? Maybe. Because you can kind of think about it like the battles are, hey, your opponent gains this much life, but it's probably more life than that. So it's like this much life plus 1 or 2. So in this case, your opponent's probably gaining 6 life, but you're going to get this Faith Keeper. They can also just let you have it if they can remove it. So there's also all kinds of dynamics going on with the battles. Next, Invasion of Gobakan. 1 and a white for a 3 loyalty battle. When it enters the battlefield, look at the target opponent's hand. You may exile a non-land card from it for as long as that card remains exiled. So owner may play it and spell cast this way. Costs 2 more to cast. And the flipped version of it is the Light Shield Array. At the beginning of your end step, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature that attacked this turn. And you can sacrifice it, and creatures you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. So the enchantment is obviously very strong, because it has this like threat of sacrifice, but then if your opponent doesn't block, then you just get a huge creatures. So you kind of just get blown out by the backside of this card. It only has 3 toughness as well. So like you're taking turn 2 off, but by doing so, you're probably preventing your opponent's next best play. Whatever they're thinking about playing, you're like, I'm going to make that cost 2 more mana. So you're kind of getting that tempo back. And then this is on the easier side of battles to flip. So I think this card's decent. I do. I don't think it's tier 1, and the only reason I don't think that is that it is a battle, and you have to flip it, and it does cost you resources. But once it's flipped, you're going to be like, wow, I'm taking over this game now. So that's really good. Next, Invasion of Theros. 2 and a white for a 4 loyalty battle. When it enters the battlefield, you search your library for an aura, god, demigod. Reveal it, put it in your hand, and shuffle, and then it transforms into this 4/4 that has lifelink and indestructible as long as you control at least 3 other enchantments, which you probably aren't in this set. It's probably not going to happen. Whenever another enchantment enters the battlefield, you control, you draw a card. So this card is kind of like weird. It's mostly a tutor for auras. If you have the card types that this wants you to have in your deck, you can play it. If you don't have them, I would not advise first picking this. I just wouldn't. I just think it's not where you want to be. Like looking up auras, like it's fine. The only one you're really going to want is the one that is a removal spell, the pacifism-ish type thing. But I don't like to call it pacifism because it has like a bad name. It's not really pacifism. Don't call it that. Okay, next, Elish Norn. I don't even really want to bother reading Elish Norn. It's 2 white. 2 white for a 3/5 vigilance, and whenever a source an opponent controls deals damage to or permanent you control, that source's control loses 2 life unless they pay 1. And then you can pay 3 and transform it along with sacrificing 3 other creatures. And then it transforms into the saga. So the 5 Praetors transform into sagas and then transform back once the saga's done. So they're just sort of like never-ending value. They're just insane. Like, all of them are insane. They're all insane. I don't like you. I'm just kind of like you. Just. You incubate 2 5 times, then you transform all the tokens. So you basically make a bunch of 2/2s. So you get all your creatures back. Your creatures get +1/+1 gain double strike, so they're unblockable, and they kill your opponent. And then you destroy all the permanents except for artifacts, lands, and Phyrexians, which is whatever. And then you flip this, and you get Elish Norn back. It just, if this ever transforms and is just and your opponent hasn't lost the game, you just win instantly. You just completely win. There's just no way. So next card is Heliod, Radiant Dawn, who can transform into a Heliod Warped Apocalypse by paying 3 and a Phyrexian mana. When it enters the battlefield, you return target enchantment card that isn't a god from your graveyard to your hand. Again, I'm skeptical of how many of them there actually are going to be. I don't think there's going to be that many. There's light enchantment-y type themes, so I don't know. I'm not super interested in this. The backside of him. You can cast spells as though they had flash. Spells that cost 1 less to cast for each card your opponents have drawn this turn. So they always cost 1 less on your opponent's turn because they've drawn 1 at the start of the turn. It's a 4/6. I don't know. This card could end up being busted. I don't see it that way. It does take a decent amount of investment, right? Because you do have to pay 4 for it, and then you have to pay another 3 and 2 life or 4 to flip it, which is a lot. It's a lot of investment, but it's doable. You can also only flip all these at sorceries. Every single card that says transform it, like with the Phyrexian mana, is going to be done at a sorcery speed. Like this one. Seraph from New Capenna is 2 and white for a 2/2 flyer, and you can pay 4 and a black Phyrexian to transform it, and it transforms into this guy, which is a 3/3 flyer. And when it attacks, you may sacrifice another creature or artifact. If you do, it gets +2/+1 until end of turn. This card does not seem super appealing to me. Maybe I'm like wrong, but it just like I don't know, like paying 4 mana, like you're paying 7 mana for a 3/3 flyer that allows you to sacrifice stuff to make it like slightly bigger. Okay, like it's fine. Next, Sunblessed Guardian, 1 and a white for a 2/2 with 5 and a red to transform it, or 5 and a red for Phyrexian, and it transforms into a 3/3 that when it attacks, you create a tapped attacking token that's a copy of it. You put a +1/+1 counter for each +1/+1 counter on this creature, and you sacrifice that token at the beginning of the next end step. Yeah, I don't know. I would say this card is fine. It is a good place to put your counters, but I don't know. Some of these are like how much of a cost is it to transform these, right? Like you're paying 5 mana at a minimum, and then you're paying 2 life, and it's like, can you afford to pay the 2 life? Maybe you can, maybe you can't. But you can play these in any deck, which is nice. So this is why the colored mana symbol doesn't really matter all that much on the Phyrexian mana. And this is the last one, I believe. I think this is the last card in white. It's Tarkir Duneshaper. It's a single white for a 1/2, and you can pay 4 and a green Phyrexian to transform it into a 4/3 with trample. So this one I actually like more than the last one, or well, about as much as the last one, and more than the first one, just because like having something on turn 1 that you can then on turn 4 be like, oh, I'll transform this into a 4/3 trample, and then whatever. Like it just seems like it's better. This wears the counters well. Right, it gets down onto the board early, so you can put +1/+1 counters on it, and then you can transform it, and it keeps them, which is good. So, yeah, I like this one. I think this one's actually pretty good, and I think that is it. So, thanks for watching this. If you watched it, if it provided any enlightenment to you, that would be fantastic. I have limited expectations of that it did that, but if so, great. See you next time.